writing is made possible by all the generations of writers who've come before and all the generations of activists who've come before to create a space in which, when you and I published, there was already Asian American literature.
Right.
So that we could at least be recognized as Asian American because previous generations had fought for that recognition. But you imagine what it was like to be a writer who was of Asian descent in the late 19th century, and they were there.
Right.
Edith Eaton, Winifred Eaton.
Right.
You know, they were very lonely people.
Right. Oh, Frederick Douglass. Right.
Like that too. You know, but so we have to acknowledge that there's a relationship between literature and political struggle.
Yeah.
And the writer never accomplishes everything just by herself or himself, especially the minority writer. So anytime a minority writer wins a prize and doesn't acknowledge the histories that have come before, you're seeing that sleight of hand of becoming a voice for the voiceless.
Right.
It's all the struggles of all those voiceless people that made the voice possible. And then the other issue with this is to refuse to accept our position in the margins. And not to think that there's a binary between the center and the margin. Right? And this is a very common binary that's offered as a false temptation to those of us who are people of color or any kind of minority in this country. And they don't have to be racial.
Sure.
You know, but the temptation is, okay, well, you're a minority. Why don't you just be universal like us? Are you a minority writer or are you a writer? That's an example of the false binary, the margin and the center. But you have to refuse that. And that's why I look to writers like Toni Morrison. You know, Toni Morrison says, yeah, I write about black people. So what? From that experience, you can find the universal. So you can't back down and say that the only way to find the universal is to write about a divorced couple in a Connecticut suburb suffering from adultery and cancer. Okay? That's a very specific experience, which is universal.
Right.
And I'm perfectly happy to read it. Now, can that divorced couple read about our experiences and acknowledge that that is universal too?
Right.
But it's up to us as writers to also make that claim.
But it's also called